The night before my wedding, I sat in my car in the dark for 45 minutes. Not because I was nervous about getting married, but because I had just read a message on my fiancé's phone that I was never supposed to see. And I had a choice to make, cry about it, or use it. I chose to use it. His mother had been testing me for 2 years, smiling to my face, poisoning everything behind my back. She thought I was just some quiet girl who didn't notice things. She thought wrong. So when she grabbed her son's arm at that dinner table and leaned in close and whispered something in Italian, something that made them both laugh while looking directly at me, she had no idea that I had spent the last 3 weeks preparing for exactly that moment. They wanted a scene. I gave them something so much worse than a scene. I gave them silence. And then I gave them the truth. In perfect Italian. If you've ever smiled through something that was slowly destroying you, this story is for you. Subscribe and hit that bell, because the people who wronged me never saw what was coming. Neither will you. My name is Claudia, and I want to be clear about something before I tell you this story. I am not a dramatic person. I don't make scenes. I don't send long emotional texts. I don't cry in front of people who have already decided they don't respect me. I learned a long time ago that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous one. They're just waiting. I had been with Marco for 3 years when he proposed. We met at work, a mid-size architectural firm in Chicago, and from the very first month, I knew his family was going to be a problem. Not because they were cold to me exactly, it was more complicated than that. They were warm in a way that felt like a performance. His mother, Giuliana, would hug me a beat too long and compliment my dress in a tone that somehow made me feel like she was actually insulting it. Marco has 2 parents, both Italian immigrants, who came to the U.S. in their 30s and built a very successful tile and flooring business. They are proud of that. They should be. It's genuinely impressive. But somewhere along the way, that pride curdled into something else, into the belief that their family was simply better than other families. That Marco, their only son, deserved someone from their world, someone Italian, someone they chose. I am half Puerto Rican, half Irish. I speak English and Spanish. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park with my mom, who worked double shifts as a nurse for most of my childhood. I put myself through college. I am, by every measure, a person who worked extremely hard for everything she has. That was never going to be enough for Giuliana. The comments started small. Questions about whether I knew how to cook real food, said with a little laugh like it was a joke. Questions about whether my family had any traditions, again with the laugh, like traditions were something only certain kinds of families got to have. Once, at a Sunday dinner about 8 months into Marco and I dating, she brought out a photo album and spent 20 minutes showing me pictures of a girl named Sophia, a family friend, dark-haired, Italian, lovely, while casually mentioning how she and Marco had been very close growing up, and how Sophia had just bought a beautiful home in the suburbs. I smiled through all of it. Marco noticed some of it. Not all of it, men rarely do, honestly, but enough that he would occasionally squeeze my hand under the table or catch my eye with an apologetic look. I appreciated that. But appreciation isn't the same as action, and Marco never actually said anything to his mother. It was always, "That's just how she is," or "She means well," or "My personal favorite, she'll come around." She did not come around. When Marco proposed, a genuinely beautiful moment, just the 2 of us, rooftop restaurant, the whole thing. I said yes immediately and completely. I loved him. I still believe that. But even in that perfect moment, a small, very realistic part of my brain was already running calculations. I knew what was coming. I knew his mother was going to make the engagement, the planning, the wedding itself into a battlefield. And I made myself a promise, standing on that rooftop with his ring on my finger. I was not going to lose. The dinner his mother organized the night before the wedding was framed as a gift. A welcome to the family gesture. Her words. She booked a private room at an upscale Italian restaurant she and her husband loved, invited about 14 people, and presented it as a warm, intimate evening. Marco was touched. I watched him tear up a little when she told him about it. I smiled and said it sounded wonderful. What I didn't tell Marco, what I hadn't told anyone, was what I had found 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks before the wedding, Marco left his phone on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. I wasn't snooping, I want to be clear about that. His screen lit up with a notification, and I glanced over purely out of habit, the way anyone does when a light flashes near them. The name on the screen was his mother's. And the preview of the message was 4 words that stopped my blood cold. "Are you sure, Marco?" I stood there for a second. Then I picked up the phone. I'm not going to pretend I agonized over that decision. I picked it up, I opened the thread, and I read everything. The messages went back 6 weeks. Giuliana had been pressuring Marco, consistently, methodically, almost clinically, to reconsider the wedding. She called me that girl in every single message. Not Claudia, not your fiancé. That girl. She told him I came from nothing. She told him that a woman like me would never understand what his family had built. She told him that Sophia, yes, that Sophia, had recently ended a relationship and that it wasn't too late to make a better choice. And Marco's responses? He didn't defend me. Not once. He said things like, "Mom, I love her." But then he'd follow it up with, "I hear what you're saying, and let's just get through the wedding and see how things settle." See how things settle? I put the phone back on the counter exactly where I found it. I walked to the bathroom door and I listened to the shower running for a long moment. Then I walked to the living room, sat down on the couch, and I made a decision so cold and so clear that it actually calmed me down completely. I was not going to blow this up the night before the wedding. I was not going to scream or cry or confront him, because here's what I understood in that moment. This was not just about one dinner or one conversation or even one terrible mother. This was a pattern. And patterns require strategy, not explosions. So I started preparing. I'd always had a basic understanding of Italian. I'd taken 2 semesters in college and retained more than I ever let on. But over the next 3 weeks, I went deep. I downloaded 3 apps. I watched hours of conversational Italian video content every night after Marco fell asleep. I focused specifically on the kinds of things a mother-in-law might say to her son at a formal dinner. Cutting remarks. Dismissive asides. The vocabulary of polite cruelty. I also spoke to a lawyer. Quietly, privately, at a consultation I booked under my maiden name, because what I had read in those messages had shifted something fundamental in my understanding of what I was walking into. I needed to know my options. I needed to know what protection looked like before I walked down that aisle. And then I walked down the aisle anyway. Because the wedding itself was not my battlefield. The dinner was. The restaurant was beautiful, low lighting, exposed brick, the kind of place that makes everything feel cinematic. Giuliana had arranged the seating so that she was directly across from me. I noticed that immediately and I filed it away. She wanted to watch my face. Fine. I had practiced my face for 3 weeks. The first hour was pleasant enough. Wine was poured, bread was passed, toasts were made. Giuliana was gracious and smiling, playing the role of generous matriarch to perfection. Marco's father, Enzo, who had always been quieter and more genuinely kind, gave a lovely toast about family and new beginnings. I almost felt something soften in me. And then the entrees came. I watched Giuliana lean toward Marco. Her voice dropped. Her eyes, just briefly, flicked to me and then away, the way someone checks to make sure they're not being heard. And then she said it. A full sentence in Italian, low and smooth and finished with a small, elegant laugh. Marco laughed too. That same apologetic smile, but he still laughed. I know exactly what she said. I had heard variations of it in my preparation. Loosely translated, she told him that I was sitting there like a lost tourist and asked if I understood anything happening around me. A lost tourist. I picked up my wine glass. I took one slow sip. I set it down. I looked directly at Giuliana, not with anger, not with hurt, with nothing. And I said, in clear and unhurried Italian, I understand everything. I've understood everything for quite some time. The table went absolutely silent. Giuliana's face did something I will remember for the rest of my life. It didn't crumble dramatically. It just emptied, like a window going dark. I continued, still in Italian, still completely calm. I also understand the messages you sent your son 6 weeks ago. About Sophia. About how I come from nothing. About waiting to see how things settle. I heard Marco say my name. I didn't look at him. I reached into my bag and placed an envelope on the table in front of Giuliana. Then I stood up, smoothed my dress, and looked around the table at the 14 people who were staring at me in total silence. I switched back to English. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. It means a lot. But I've realized over the last few weeks that I deserve a family that actually wants me in it, so I'll be skipping tomorrow. Then I looked at Marco for the last time that evening, not with hatred, just with the quiet finality of someone who has already grieved and moved on. The envelope has a copy of the prenuptial amendment your mother didn't know I had drafted. Have your lawyer look at it and tell Sophia I said good luck. I walked out of that restaurant alone, got in my car, and drove to my mother's house. She opened the door before I even knocked. I had called her earlier that week because she is the one person in my life who has never once made me feel like I came from nothing. She made tea. We sat at her kitchen table until 2 a.m. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt completely free. The wedding was canceled. Marco called 17 times that night. I answered once, long enough to say, I'm not angry. I'm just done. His mother never reached out. I imagine she was too busy processing the fact that her quiet, smiling, lost tourist of a future daughter-in-law had been fluent in her contempt the entire time. I am doing fine, by the way. Better than fine. I got a promotion 4 months later. I moved into a new apartment with huge windows and no ghosts in it. I took a real Italian class, the kind where you sit in a room with other people and actually laugh, and I'm planning a solo trip to Rome next spring. Not for anyone else, just for me. Some people mistake your silence for weakness. Let them. Silence is just patience wearing a disguise. And patience, it turns out, is the most devastating weapon in the world